Aldridge, and to start 2023 I thought it'd be fun to look back at the books that I read in 2022, and I did a little reel using the Goodreads app that does stats on what you read during 2022, and I thought, why not talk about them in more depth. So I'm going to show you my year in books review from Goodreads. To find it, all you do is just put into the URL the Goodreads website address, which is www.goodreads.com/user/year_in_books/ and then the year that you want to look at. So I'll put in 2022, and you have to be logged into your account when you type that into the URL, but you can see what your books are. So I managed to read 25 books last year, which I think is really good for me because I am a slow reader. I usually read about one book a month, so I was averaging about 2 books a month, which I think for myself that's really, really a lot of reading, which is probably why I didn't do as much writing as I really wanted to do that year. So the first stats show us the shortest book that I read, which was Romancing the Beat. That book came recommended to me by someone on Instagram. It was another author that I'm really close with. She's a really great writer. She writes romance. I don't write romance, but romance is always in my novels because I love romance. So I thought it'd be a good book for me because it's very similar to the whole beat process that's in Save the Cat, which is a writing book that I absolutely love. So I gave it a go, but Romancing the Beat didn't really do it for me. It was like Save the Cat, but not in as much detail, which I thought that will appeal to me because it'll be like just brief and get to the point, but it didn't. It just felt like I didn't get anything extra out of it. So if you've already got Save the Cat, I wouldn't say get Romancing the Beat. But if you haven't got Save the Cat and you write romance, then it might be a good book to have a look at. The longest book I read was Empire of the Vampire, and I would say it is up there in one of my favourites from last year. Things that it was bought for me as a surprise gift from my cousin. She bought it for me because last year, it was actually in 2021, I slipped on the school run and I broke my ankle. So then I was in one of those boots and on crutches for, I think it was about 6 weeks. It was a long time. And I think she imagined that my life was going to be me stuck in bed resting my leg, which is probably what the ideal situation would be if you have broken your leg. However, having young children means that I couldn't, so I was still hobbling around, chasing after them, using my crutches quite a lot. So there wasn't much sitting down for me. So I didn't actually manage to pick up the book and find time to read it until 2022. And one of the real delights of this book is throughout the pages there is character art. They're black and white sketches, like ink drawings, and they are brilliant. And it's left me with this aspiration that one day I want to release my own hardback with ink drawings in it, because I really enjoyed that. The average book length of the books that I was reading was about 282 pages. The book that I read that's been shelved the most by the most people is Cruel Prince, which is no surprise. It's one of those books that's very well known, very popular. And the reason I got it was at the start of the pandemic, back probably early 2020 or even the end of 2019, there was a lot of people talking about the Cruel Prince being this enemies to lovers romance, fantasy, fae on TikTok. And and then on Instagram, it was just everywhere. And I had a Kindle, so I just downloaded it, checked it out thoroughly, downloaded it and then forgot about it. Literally just forgot that I had the book. But I felt like I had it because it was just sitting there. It was in my TBR. One day I'll get around to reading it. But I got to 2022, still hadn't read it. And I thought, you know what? I might as well give it a read. And I really, really enjoyed it. This could be in the top 5. The other book that I managed to pick up was Shadow of the Circus. You'll find on my channel that I have got a review of a previous book by J.D. Groom. I'll try and link it. The one that I'd read previously was Sorceress of Truth. I absolutely loved the book, raved about it, and I've patiently been waiting for it to release Sorceress of Flame, which is supposed to be coming out, I think, this year. So I'm looking forward to that's one of the books I'm looking forward to this year for 2023. So let's hope it comes out. But in the meantime, she released this prequel, and you can get it for free from her website. So as I really enjoyed the writing of her previous novel, I wanted to go and check out this prequel. It was free. It's short. It was really good. So I think the reason it's not been shelved very often by other people is that J.D. Groom is an indie author and not very well known. If you haven't heard of her, go just Google J.D. Groom. You'll find her website. You can download this book and you can just check out what you think of her writing. It's a historical vampire novel. It's set in Blackpool when they were building the Blackpool Tower. It's really well done. I just didn't love it as much as Sorceress of Truth, which is a UA romance, which is the sort of books that I really, really love. But it was really, really good. My average rating for 2022 is 4.5 stars. I know to some people that probably sounds very high, but I think it's because I tend to take my time picking the books that I want to read. And most of the time, they are books I absolutely love. It's very rare for me to pick up a book that I don't like, because I do read the blurbs, I do read what other people have put as reviews, so I've got an idea of whether or not it's the sort of thing I want to read, because I am a slow reader, so I need to make sure I'm investing my time in books I love, and that's why my ratings tend to be high, because I am picky about the books that I choose. So the people that have checked out Shadow the Circus have probably all given it 5 stars, because it is really, really good. And because she's a small author, the people that subscribe to her newsletter are her fans, and they're probably the ones that have mostly heard about this information. But if you haven't heard about her, go check her out. She is lovely, and the books are great writing. My first review of the year was Forever Burn by Trinity Lem. She's a author on Instagram. I met her. She's an indie author. She's quite young. I think she wrote this while she was actually still in university, but don't quote me on that. You have to go check it out. It was. I'd been following her for a long while, so I'd heard her talking about her book, but it still surprised me. There's a lot of, it's quite dark romance, because it's sweet as well, but it's dark because it deals with a lot of mental health in the novel. It's written really well. It's worth checking out. It also gave me a little bit of those vibes from that. Oh God, I can't think what it's called. It's on. I'm sure it's on Netflix or it's on Prime. The bad boy romance. It is definitely a bad boy romance. Okay, so now when we move on to the next section of this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to Macy Dyer-King. She's known on Instagram as at the Bright Side Girl, and the reason I wanted to give a shout out to her in this video is because when I posted my reel of my 2020 books and the stats and all that, she was the one who commented saying, which would you pick as your top 5? So that is what has inspired the other part of this video. So it has been tricky to pick just 5 books that I absolutely loved, because as you can see from my reviews, they were mostly all 4 and 5 star reviews, because I know what I like. So let's get into the ones that I have managed to narrow it down to. So the first winner is it's a cheat really, because it's a whole series. So it's The Folk of the Air. So when I read the core print, I blazed through it. I absolutely loved it. I managed to read it. Obviously, I already had it down on my Kindle. The second book in the series is called The Wicked King. And I was able to get that for free because we have Amazon Prime. So I read that straight away after and whizzed through it. And then I got to The Queen of Nothing, and that is not available on Amazon Prime. So I had this little dilemma, because it was like, I didn't want to just go out and buy one book in the series, like the last book in the series. It seemed a bit weird. It's like, you need to have the ones before it in the series to have the set, don't you? And then I remembered I have a library card. So I logged on to the eBook app for my library, which is Libby, and I downloaded The Queen of Nothing on there, and I was able to read it for free over Christmas, and I was just so made up. And as these are my favourite books, they are on my wish list to buy so I can, like, as a dragon, hoard the books that I love. I need it on my bookshelf. Of the standout books for 2022 is a choice of for Essence. It's book one of the Essence Chronicles by Katelyn Uhrich. I hope I pronounced her name right. I discovered her through World Indie Warriors. As you can see on here, it's only got one review, so that's probably my review. But it has got 5 ratings. She's not a very well-known author, but the reason this one made it onto my list was it was like nothing I've ever read before. So it's set where the gods lives, because the main character's a little godling, so and called Essie, which is, I guess, short for essence. So they're all like spirits, and they look after the spirits that go into the different worlds, like so the human world and stuff like that. So there's like that going on, but it was so vivid, the descriptions, considering this is like a not real place. It's all come from someone's imagination. It was so well explained, and I hate heavy descriptions, so it wasn't heavy descriptions. It was just so on point with the way that it told you how things looked and how things were, and building the world up. It was so vivid in my mind the way it was written that I loved it. And I started reading it with my son, but I ended up loving it so much that I just couldn't wait for him to have time to read it with me, that I then went off and I read it on my own. I read it as an ebook, but it's definitely something that I would like to buy the real physical book. And I can see that some more of the series have come out now, so there's more to read. So another one that made my top 5 was Blood Moon by Lucy Cuthew. I have done a full review of this on my channel, which I will link for you. It was written in a way that I have never read a book before. It's sort of like in text messages. It's very modern. It's about a teenager who has her first sexual experience and is also dealing with things going on with high school, like bullying and periods and all that stuff. It describes it here as told in verse. There was just like little and punchy sort of text, which made it really quick to read. It was like just so quick to read. My copy of the book looked more like this one down here. Can I go to click on show this edition? So it had this pink cover with a sort of blood spot on it. I picked this book up from the library. I didn't know really anything about the book at all. What attracted me to this book was I thought it was going to be a fantasy book about vampires or werewolves, because the name is Blood Moon, but it's not. The main character in the story has got an obsession with space, and that's what the moon part is about, and the blood is about the period part. But I did really, really enjoy this book. I'm so glad that I did pick it up, and I would highly recommend it. So one of the books that really blew me away during 2022 was The Seawomen. So I will go on NetGalley, which is a website for reading ARCs, which stands for Advanced Reader Copy. So you get to read books before they are released to the public. I went on NetGalley, had a little search for mermaid books because I was looking for something mermaid related to read, and this came up, The Seawomen. Now, it's not, well, I don't know. I would say it's not UA fiction just because it's quite dark, although the main character is the right age for UA fiction. But the reason I'd say it isn't UA fiction is it's very Handmaid's Tale kind of vibes to it. So imagine The Handmaid's Tale, but with mermaids. So they live in this dystopian, patriarchal time. They live on an island, and the men basically rule the island with very, very strong religious views, and the women are in a position where their only purpose is really to serve their husband and reproduce, and they must show that they are very are following God's ways, and they get blamed for everything that goes wrong. A storm comes, it must be a woman that's like not being a true holy woman, so the women must be punished because of the storm. There's a disease come, it must be the women's fault because they must have done something bad. So you can imagine how these women are literally walking on eggshells trying to prove that they are perfect. They're doing everything that their priest is telling them they must do to be the perfect woman. And all of them are growing up in this very controlled environment. And one of the rules is that they can't look at the sea, because otherwise they will encourage the sea women to come. And it's considered like the worst crime that they could do is to disobey God and go to the sea. But living on an island, the sea is all around them, so it's very hard to ignore that the sea is there. And the main character starts to come to a point in the story where she is asking questions about this way of life. She's not rebelling against it, because it is obviously very dangerous to rebel, but it's dangerous to even ask the questions. It's that strict, the religious society. And you're with her wanting to find out the answers. Are the stories about the sea women true? Is what is going on? And the story is so good. You definitely read it. I love this book so much that I went and bought the hardback copy for my shelves to love and hold all to myself. So yeah, I did also buy a copy to give to my cousin to say thanks to her for buying me the book, The Empire of the Vampire. But then she got pregnant, and I didn't think that it was a suitable book to give someone that was pregnant. Just a little word of warning. If you do decide to read it and might be also thinking about starting a family, it might not be the most appropriate book. So let's move on. Last but not least, and I promise that I haven't done these in any order. I mean, it was hard enough to narrow it down to my 5 top favourites from 2022. But this one made the list, and to be honest with you, my sister bought me this book a while back, and I tried reading it probably when I had my son. So that shows how long I've had this book. But when I first started to read it, I didn't finish it, and it was a DNF. Then I tried to read it again, and it was a DNF. And I think if my sister hadn't gifted it to me, and I really respect people when someone's bought you a book, it feels like you really should read it and appreciate that gift. So if it hadn't been that my sister had gifted me this book, I might have just given up on it. I might have just given it away to charity so that it could find someone who did appreciate it. But because my sister bought it for me, I really wanted to love it. So I think it might have been like maybe the 3rd or the 4th attempt at trying to start this book. And it's a testimony to the fact that sometimes you need to read a book when you're in the right mood to receive that book. Because when I read this book this time, I absolutely loved it. This book is written like the fairy tales you read as a child, but for adults. Its own story. It doesn't feel to me like it's based on a existing story. So there's these 2 sisters, and they live growing up on this hill, and one of them starts turning into a mermaid. So neither the woman who's raising them, she's kind of like into potions and stuff. She's a little witchy sort of person. And she's raised them, and she's always told them this story about how they were both found. They're not actually her biological children. And one of them, the one that's turning into a mermaid, is always said to have been found in a shell. I think that's right off the top of my head. But as she starts turning more and more into a mermaid, she starts getting sicker and sicker. So it becomes this. The other sister takes on the journey to take her mermaid sister, back to the sea, because that's where she needs to be. It is a brilliant book, and I'm so glad I got to read it and enjoy it and love it, because this is going to be one of those books that I'm going to remember forever, because it is really special. So I've already set my reading challenge for 2023 on Goodreads, so hopefully I'll be able to collect all the stats and have a look at how I did this year. I've set my goal for 18 books. So each year I've only, like 2019, only set my goal for 6 books. I managed to read 11. So then I upped it to 12 books and I read 12. Then in 2021, I set my goal at 10 books and I read 15. So it has been increasing each year, because last year I did 25 books when I set my goal for 12. However, I think that I read too much last year, that I didn't have enough time to make time to do my writing and all my publishing stuff. So I've now reduced that goal to 18, so somewhere between 2021 and 2022's goal. And I think that's good. As you can see, I've already finished one book this year, which was the Shadow and Bone book by Leah Bordago. That was actually an audio. I felt like I was able to do an audio for that book because I've seen the Netflix series. So if I ever did drift off with my imagination, I was able to get back into the book. Read in 2022. Here are the 25 books, and I'm just going to quickly spotlight some of the ones that I really did enjoy. So we covered The Guidal by Roxy Eloise. That was an ARC read that I did for her, and it's a really good futuristic type book, a bit like Hunger Games, but not quite as dark and twisty as Hunger Games. But there's like this competitiveness and this control and unusual society. Really good fun read, and a bit of romance in there as well. Two More Lives by Katelyn Legaspi is kind of like an action-packed superhero style story. Kind of reminded me a little bit like the stories you get like in anime, that kind of thing, like Naruto with the training camps and stuff like that. Really, really good and original idea. Keep going. What else was? Steel Princess by April Grace is an excellent story. It's a fantasy story with cyborgs, I think they're called. They're like robots, but with like kind of human organisms in there as well, because they're like also living robots. And there's also the fantasy side with like, you've got mermaids in there, you've got giants in there. It was very like really good fantasy novel. There's a lot happening in it. Sabrina, I find that was one like The Cruel Prince. I downloaded that onto my Kindle and never got around to reading it. It was a graphic novel and it read really well on the Kindle. I really enjoyed it, and I'll probably read more of those on there. What Are Friends For by Sarah Sutton. I've read other books by Sarah Sutton. I will link to the one that's Out of My League by Sarah Sutton, because I've done a review of that on YouTube, so I'll link that. And she's really good at writing sweet high school romances set in America. Another one that I haven't mentioned, I wouldn't say this is my favourite of Rachel Vincent's book novels, but I do love Rachel Vincent books, and there's one of her books is on my wish list to read this year, especially as I did pre-order it and now it's old. And I really enjoyed Fate of the Blue Moon by H.B. Lyon. It was a lot more involved than I thought it was going to be. There's a lot of like development and world building in the book. If you like that, there's not really much romance. It's very action packed. I feel like that was the bit that was lacking for me. It's like I wanted a little bit of romance. But yeah, that was a really good book. And it's part of a really big series, which I do have. So I hope I'll get to read that. So that is the review of my books from 2022. Thank you for sticking with me as we went and looked back at my books that I read during 2022. I hope you have enjoyed it and maybe found a new book for yourself to go and check out. If you have stuck around this long, I hope you take the time to also like and subscribe my videos, and I hope to see you around in future. Thank you.